easy life, okay? Because when they come from Texas, they come up here to look for work so they can feed their family. And I would say this too, that they face a lot of problems, doing that as a migrant worker because, for example, they don't have no insurance. Some of the migrants do not have, insured for a job. And especially, when they come into the area, they do not know where they're going to stay at. And they're going to have, they're just taking a chance, to be, in this area, and everywhere they go.
Good evening, I'm Twyla Young. What you see behind me here is a migrant farm labor camp near Muscatine. It is owned and operated by Ivan Goddard, and it is the temporary home for migrant laborers who come to work at seasonal farm work in this part of Iowa. Although you have probably never seen a camp like this, they are well off the beaten track. They exist in several parts of the state. Although one of the common complaints about the presence of migrants is that they take jobs away from permanent residents, in fact, migrants in general work at jobs that no one else will do, for pay so low that permanent residents would probably not accept it. They cultivate and harvest where machines would damage the crop, where hand labor is less expensive or more efficient than mechanization, or where no machine has yet been invented to do the job.
Migrants are farm workers that travel from a home base to Iowa and don't return for anywhere from 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to about 6 months. And those migrants that come here to Iowa come primarily from the Rio Grande Valley area of Texas, and that's where their homes and their families are year-round. In addition to migrants, we also have seasonal farm workers that will stay in an area for probably maybe about 6 months at a time, and before they move on or go back home. But essentially that's what a migrant is, somebody who does not return to their home every evening. They leave their home to find employment.
What kinds of work do migrants do in Iowa?
Depends on the area of Iowa. For example, we have a pretty good population of migrants down in the Shenandoah, southwestern part of Iowa. Down there, the migrants work primarily in nurseries. We have a fairly large population of migrants in the Muscatine area. And in Muscatine, they work primarily with tomatoes, melons, and peppers. We also have migrants working in Ellsworth. Ellsworth, they work in a turkey processing plant. Other migrants in Williamsburg, there they do detasseling. So it kind of depends what part of Iowa they go to.
Last year, the Migrant Action Program, a federally funded agency that assists migrant families in a variety of ways, made contact with 4,600 migrants. A consulting firm studying migrants in Iowa estimated that there were about twice that many in the state at some time during the year. Most migrants come to Iowa in family groups, and most live in migrant camps. The Goddard Camp is one of 18 in the state, and by the estimation of Migrant Action Program officials, state health officials, and the people who live here, it is probably in the worst condition. Housing is a continuing problem for migrants. They are in large part dependent upon the grower to provide housing for them.
As far as the migrants themselves are concerned, they have no choice. If they want to work, then this is where they live. If they don't want to work, then they go someplace else.
Why is that? Is that because why is this particular group of people in that particular economic situation that they have no choice?
Well, yeah,
What are the factors, though, that make it true that they have no choice?
Well, anytime you travel, 1,500 miles from home in a pickup truck with a wife and 4 kids and all all your belongings in the back of a pickup truck. You either sleep in the car or the truck, or you sleep in whatever you can find. At least when it rains, there's something to keep the rain off you, and that's better than sleeping on the side of the road. But remember, when a migrant comes up here, he can't rent a motel. He doesn't have money to rent an apartment. In order to rent an apartment, if you've got a wife and 3 children, an apartment that size will run you around $200, $250 plus $100 or $150 deposit, plus deposit for utilities, and that would cost them $500 before they ever moved in. And it'd take them a couple months to earn $500. So there's no choice. They have to live there if they want to work.
When we visited the Goddard camp, one of the larger in the state, we found large families living in small one-room houses, appliances which worked poorly or not at all, 1 water spigot and 2 privies to serve as plumbing and sanitary facilities for the entire camp. Of the 18 migrant camps in Iowa, over half are in the Muscatine area. The rest are scattered around the rest of the state. Ken Schuchette of the State Health Department says that although conditions here are probably less ideal than in any of the others, there are 4 or 5 camps which he says are only a little better. There are state laws which set out minimum requirements for migrant housing and which are the basis for health department inspections. There are requirements which define the necessary amount of floor space and of window space, the distance that water sources must be from privies, and the like. These houses, by the way, are not required to have any sort of indoor plumbing. The law does require that drinking water test out safe. So much for the requirements of the law. In practice, there are any number of obstacles between the letter of the law and the actual conditions in a given house, occupied at a given time during the growing season by any given family. Hector Sanchez, director of the state Spanish-speaking People's Commission, says that there is more involved in condemning a housing camp than simply the condition of the buildings.
The other situation you're dealing with is the economic situation of the farmer himself, the individual farmer. When you deal with that situation, you say, well, why don't you fix up your housing, or you've got a violation here, you need an inside a restroom, whatever. And he says, well, I fix up the housing as best as I can with the money that I have to spare or to put into or invest into this housing situation for the migrant. The migrant comes around here for 8 to 10 weeks out of the year, and I'm not going to invest $3,000 to $5,000 in a house. It's going to be sitting there for the rest of the year, or insulated or whatever. So aside from his economic situation, it's the utility of the property itself. And if you're dealing with a large camp with a company and all that, which has the facility and the economic means and all that, well, they would be probably more susceptible to abide by the rules. And if they build anything, they'll build it according to the law, because they have the means and they're going to use it a lot more. If you go into the individual farming areas and you say you fix up, you fix up, you fix up, and you've got 10 farmers who have violations, and all of them have to fix up, and out of those 10, 5 don't want to, and they say it doesn't do me any good to fix it up, or I'm going to lose money doing it. It's not economically feasible to do that. I either let it go or I don't grow anymore. And then you've lost 5 farmers, and as a result of that, you lost the number of migrants that could come into that area and do the work, and also the number of people that might have been able to settle out. And so economically it affects things in various manners. Instead of just saying, well, you've got one violation, fix it, and that's the end of that.
The State Health Department did begin a crackdown about 3 years ago of camps with blatantly unsafe and unsanitary conditions, and since then about half a dozen growers in the Muscatine area have stopped production of crops which require migrants rather than upgrade the camps. Enforcement is not just a cut and dried affair. Visit the camps, measure the floor area, check the water system, and demand the owner fix the place up. The present system requires a drawn-out series of notifications and required time allowed to make improvements. If the bad conditions continue to be ignored by the owner, the health department turns the whole thing over to a local county attorney for prosecution. According to Schuchette, sometimes the county attorney has to be pushed to prosecute, and often, by that time, the harvest is over, the migrants have moved on, the camp is empty, and the matter is dropped. As bad as some migrant camps are, there is at least one camp in the state which migrant officials call model. It is here at the Holden Seed Company near Williamsburg. Holden Foundation Seed Company had for several years used local students during the summer for detasseling and other hand work. But expansion, changes in the growing season, and a decreasing number of young people available to do the work made Holden look toward using migrant labor. In 1975, Holden is something of a latecomer to the migrant labor business, the company built this camp. It is in an isolated area outside Williamsburg, and the apartments are built in an abandoned poultry building. There's nothing fancy here, but the stove and refrigerator in each apartment works. There is running water in each one, and separate indoor bathrooms for each family. This is luxury compared to some migrant accommodations. One of the most impressive features about visiting this camp is the attitude of the families who come to work here. They are effusive in their praise of the work, the pay, the living quarters, the attitudes of the people who run Holden Seed, and their desire to return here, as most of them do, from one year to the next. Interesting also is the view that others involved with migrants have of this camp. The State Health Department doesn't worry about migrants at Holden Seed, not only because of the physical condition of the camp, but, they say, also because of an attitude, a willingness to do what is right and take the initiative in creating not only livable accommodations, but also a good working relationship with their employees. One official with the Migrant Action Program described this camp, as compared to others in the state, as fantasy land. Ron Holden's ideas, however, cut a little closer to the line of pragmatism. He is quick to point out that he has been well pleased with the work done by the migrants he employs. He also points out, less readily, that all has not been smooth going for the Holden migrant camp. Holden says he found distrust of his motives from migrant officials, unbending and arbitrary rulings from federal inspectors, inconsistency and unreasonableness on many fronts while building the camp. Holden claims that when his company settled on using migrants, he decided that good employer-employee relations based on mutual respect would be his goal. Judging from his comments and those of his workers, he's achieved it. But whatever Holden has accomplished, he is eager to defend other growers' inability or unwillingness to go this same route. For one thing, this camp cost $40,000 to build, and it requires considerable routine maintenance. It is also occupied for several months a year. A vegetable grower with a small operation and a camp that's only occupied for 6 weeks to a couple of months may feel, and may be able to convince the authorities, that such an expense is neither justifiable nor possible. But although the living conditions of migrant laborers are one of the most visible aspects of their lives, their problems neither begin with nor end in the migrant housing camps. More on that in a moment. Most migrants in Iowa come from extreme South Texas, from an area which ranks as the poorest in this country and which borders on one of the poorest areas of Mexico. Although most migrants are native or naturalized United States citizens or resident aliens, many were born in Mexico, and many more are only a generation or so removed from Mexico. The legacy that these immigrants bring with them to this country is generally extreme poverty and a lack of education, two elements which tend in general to be self-perpetuating and which make it very difficult to break out of the migrant cycle.
The thing that makes anybody being a migrant is the economic situation in most cases. You don't move into another area if the job that you have or the situation that you're living under is better than what is, or people tell you is, or exists on the other side of the fence. It's just like, you know, the old saying, the grass is greener on the other side of the hill, but if you haven't seen it, you don't know. So if you want to play it safe, you stay where you're at. But if economic conditions are so deplorable where you're at, you're bound to go seeking something else somewhere other than where you live in, or the area that you reside in. So if we're talking about the economic conditions and the wages and the average income in some of these counties in Texas, for example, where the low-income families are about 40 to 50%, as compared to Polk County, where the unemployment rate is about 2 or 3% for, you know, on the average. Well, the conditions might or must be better, and the opportunities, you know, are probably better in most cases. Okay, it might be better for someone who's educated or for the general public. But for the migrant, they may not be, because even if he comes all the way up here looking for something better or seeking the better life, as you might want to put it, he has to be trained and he has to be prepared, you know, to compete with people who reside in this area or people who have certain skills. So what he does is, well, I have to survive somewhere. So the first thing he does is comes and looks at the type of position or the job where he was accepted just for whatever he has with him, for whatever he's equipped with. And the best equipment he has are his hands, right? So he can go out to the field and pick. Nobody's going to give him a test to see if he can do the job or not. They just turn him loose and there you go. And we tell you what the rate is for whatever you produce, and then you become a migrant.
Working in the fields, you know, labor, okay, it runs from $1.30 to $2.50 an hour.
Is that depending upon the type of labor that it is?
Yes, because, you know, you can work by the hour, you can work by the contract, or you can work, you know, like if you work in the soybeans, you know, you can work by acre, by hour, or by the road, you know. But it all depends, you know, what kind of work they're going to do. On housing, some of the migrants, you know, they still pay where they're living at, and some they don't. Because
even in grower-owned camps,
right.
They sometimes have to pay rent for that?
Right, they do, you know. But still, you know, people doesn't believe that, but it's true. Because, you know, we have seen that. Because even though, you know, okay, in some places, you know, they take bonuses out, you know, that they say that if you don't stay, you know, to the end of the crop, you don't get that money back, which that money, you know, belongs to them. But then, you know, they do it this way, you know, that, okay, you know, I cannot give you the money back because, you know, you were living in my place. Still come back, you know, that they have to pay rent. But still, it's kind of hard, you know, to really prove that.
A problem which dogs the footsteps of these families wherever they go is poor health, particularly malnutrition-linked diseases. Lack of information about proper nutrition and a lack of money for medical care are two of their biggest stumbling blocks to better health. The Migrant Action Program has launched one plan and is designing another to combat those problems.
Essentially, what we try to do is with the nutritional unit, which is a small a mini Jimmy, and it's equipped with all kinds of cooking utensils and stuff like that. We try to provide educational situations for migrants, specifically aimed at enhancing their nutritional intake. What is the nutritional values of certain food? How do you plan menus for a week to ensure that you get all the nutritional value, nutritional intake that you need for a week? And what we're trying to find out this year is how valid is education as a tool to combat anemia and other malnutrition deficiencies. In the past, there's always been money for stuff like food stamps and so forth. Well, if the individual is not purchasing and eating the right kinds of foods, it doesn't do any good to give them food stamps. So what we're embarking on is an experiment to see if through nutritional education we can change eating habits, dietary habits of migrants, which in turn will eliminate nutritional deficiencies such as anemia. I'm only allowed to spend for a whole year $500 on medical expenses for a whole family, or $500 for a single person. The Department of Labor makes no distinction. Well, $500 is pretty good for a single guy. They're usually young and healthy, and very seldom do I spend anywhere near that amount. But for families, or for wives that are having children, I'm limited. $500 is pretty limiting. Employers do not do not provide health insurance for the migrants. And the migrants do not make enough money that they can afford to go and get their teeth examined anytime they want it, like you or I can. So we're kind of in a dilemma here. What I've been exploring is the possibility of providing hospitalization and medical insurance, say through Blue Cross Blue Shield, for the migrants for the time that they're here in Iowa. Essentially, we would like to collaborate with the migrant himself, whatever he can contribute to the cost of this, to the employer. The employer can contribute a portion to it, and then some of that money that I have set aside for medical expenses and cover the cost of the premiums, the monthly premiums for the months that they're here in Iowa. This would ensure that they would not be turned away from hospitals like they are now. I've contacted various people in HEW in Kansas and Washington, Department of Labor in Washington. Nobody seems to have heard of anything like this before, and they don't know what to tell me. They don't know whether they should tell me, yes, go ahead and do it, or no, you can't do it. It's kind of like you're talking about something there in Iowa that hasn't been tried anywhere, and we don't know what to tell you. It might get up to the Secretary of Labor, I don't know, then again, before I get an answer on it. But I feel that for about the same amount of money, and of course we're talking about tax dollars here, about the same amount of tax money that I'm spending now, and all the hassle and rigmarole that you go through, I could get much better health care for the migrants through statewide health insurance plan.
But while the Migrant Action Program is involved in a whole spectrum of what they call supportive services, monitoring work and housing conditions, providing medical and legal assistance and emergency aid of all kinds, the main thrust of the program is to help families move out of the migrant style of life and into a stable life that allows them to remain in one community, working at one job the year round. The process is called settling out, and the Migrant Action Program wants to settle out 350 families in Iowa this year. It is a complicated process.
Migrants that we try to settle out, like as I mentioned before, and enroll them in skill training programs. They have no money to pay for housing. They have no money to pay the rent. They have no money to pay enrollment fees if they want to go to school. They have no money to just to pay the day-to-day cost of living kinds of things.
Migrants that are in the migrant stream continuously have extended families where they have cousins and uncles and relatives that travel in many instances together, and they stay together. And if one of them tries or wants to settle out and stays, he may not socially, he may not be able to stand the pressure as far as being by himself or being out here in a little-known area where he has nobody to socialize with and can't stand it, and he says, no, I'm going home because that's where my friends are.
Every family will do this, you know, different way. The way that I broke the cycle was this, you know, that I had to know where I was going to work at, where I was going to live, how much I was going to get. But still, you know, it was just, to me, it was, you know, that I had to take a chance to break the cycle, to see myself, you know, my family, to see if I can have a better future for myself and my family. It's a lot of problems that you're going to say, that you have to face, you know, because you don't know the area, you don't know where you're going to be at. And some of the families that, you know, that I see now, they've been a migrant, you know, for years and years, and it's really hard, you know, to break this cycle for them, because they have to make their own decision. There's a chance, you know, that I don't think, you know, that some of the family will never break the cycle. I was thinking about the future of my family, that I didn't want my family, you know, to go through what I went through. I want them to have a better education, because myself, you know, I did not have the opportunity in which my family does have the opportunity now, you know, through different agencies.
What kinds of changes have you seen in migrants' lives in general since you were 11?
To tell you the truth, you know, the only life, you know, they had changed, you know, this, you know, that the migrant, you know, could speak out themselves now. You know, that they know their rights, you know, what rights they have. And they're fighting for their rights, like, okay, for example, you know, that if they need, you know, some opportunity to go to school, okay, for the children, you know, they do not, you know, just sit down, you know, they're afraid to say, you know, or go to the school system and say, you know, they're not giving my kids, you know, the opportunity. And they, you know, I would say, you know, that that their lives are more open, you know, to say something than it was before. And they're getting more. They had been, you know, they gave, okay, through the agencies, you know, they had given, you know, education how to become, you know, more freedom, you know, to say, you know, what they think. But I would say, you know, that some of the families, you know, the older people, you know, they do not want to say anything because they're afraid. The reason they're afraid because, you know, they know they will not find a job, you know, and because they had worked their lives as a migrant, and they'd rather be like that instead of, you know, rocking the boat.
I'm Twyla Young. Good night.